On that day, on February 26, 1985, after picking up Mr. Cooper and Mr. Sawyer, the pilots, from their meeting in El Paraiso, they came out of the meeting and they had a cooler marked vaccine. The cooler was a large cooler, probably about a 96 or 100 quart size, if you understand the sizes of coolers, very large, commercial grade. It was sealed and it was marked vaccine. We put it on board the aircraft. We flew all of them to La Mesa, Honduras. The two pilots were scheduled to catch a flight back to El Salvador. The cooler was destined for Panama to a Dr. Harari. I was given instructions to pass it on to a U.S. Air Force C-130 that was landing there sometime within the next few hours. When we unloaded the cooler from the aircraft, the seal broke on it. It popped open. I think that probably the hard landing that I had and bounced it around inside the aircraft on that particular occasion on a very hot day helped aid in breaking that seal. But when the seal broke, we found a large quantity of bricks wrapped in a blue medical tape. We opened it up. I put my finger across the powdery substance, crystalline type powder, put it on my tongue, and it immediately numbed my tongue. Previous experience told me that this was cocaine. In estimating the amount of cocaine inside that cooler, it was over 100 kilos of cocaine. I asked the pilot who it was going to, and he said in Honduras, or in Panama, it was going to a man called Dr. Harari. Dr. Harari, I would find out later, was actually Mike Harari, a Mossad agent assigned to General Manuel Noriega as a confidant. Upon arriving back at Pomarola Air Base, I immediately went into our secure lines I called Washington Switch, and I advised them, my controller at Washington Switch, what I had found. My controller, a man codenamed Jake that I'd met in earlier years in Task Force 160, was actually Ollie North. Mr. North told me that it was evidence that the Sandinistas were dealing in cocaine. The Contras had confiscated it during a battle from the Sandinista government, and it was destined for world courts, for the warehouses, and to be used as evidence in world courts against the Sandinista government. During my time in Honduras, probably 8 tons of medical supplies in a light powder and a crystalline, 2 different substances, were flown by my medical aircraft. Always marked medical supplies of some sort, and normally delivered to waiting C-130s or civilian C-123s or DC-3s in the area of operations. On one particular occasion, following my initial find, I had an engine failure. During the auto-rotation process, the blades on my aircraft had been put into a negative pitch position so that it would not auto-rotate correctly. After landing and having the maintenance officer look at the aircraft, we did survive the landing. It did damage the aircraft. But Mr. Cooper, our maintenance officer, looked at it and said, "It's amazing that you guys survived. These blades are completely negative pitch. They should never have rotated on their own. They should have gone into a counter-rotation and dropped you out of the sky like a Dipsy dumpster." Fortunately, having aviation skills that I have, and that's what I do for a living. I can fly an aircraft under any radar anywhere. That's my forte. That's why I was chosen for this, and that's how I was chosen to be used in the intelligence community throughout my career. Having survived that, we knew that there were some problems. So on the back of our flight plans, I would normally try to cover ourselves and provide insurance for what was going on. My passengers were written on the back of the flight plan after I landed. The cargo that we found on board the aircraft were written on the back of the flight plans after I landed. And anything having to do with the mission that was of interest were written on the back of the flight plans after I landed. This was all done at base operations where the flight plans were filed at Pomarola Air Base in Honduras. During this 3-month period, we collected a number of documents in both flight plans, mission briefs, and mission air-evac medical reports that we made these notes on. It's interesting that they aren't just my notes. I did have crew members who can corroborate most of what I have to say, They remember the instance as well.
So you developed insurance, in other words.
We developed an insurance policy in that manner, and in later years I found that I would have to develop even a greater insurance policy. The people I worked for, the people I flew, are all on these flight plans for this 3 to 4 month period. They were filed with base operations, and a very trusted Honduran government official kept those in his chain of custody so that they were protected through the years. In 1995, I went back to Honduras and I collected these documents after a threat from Ollie North to give up the documents or else. I knew that to give him the documents wasn't going to work. I knew where I'd end up if I gave him the documents. So in lieu of that, I went back to Honduras. I took my wife. We flew into Honduras. We were followed. When we landed in Belize first, I knew that we were being followed at that point. I was able to evade the person who was assigned to follow us so that I could meet with the person who had these documents. He gave me certified copies of the documents and we returned to the U.S. Within 2 weeks of returning to the United States, I was arrested by the FBI and placed in prison. But let me tell you even a little more about the instances that followed my arrest. In 1995, I was arrested by the FBI within 2 weeks of returning to the United States from Honduras. While in Honduras, I picked up certified copies of the documents, which I told you about earlier, and I'll show you copies of in just a moment. While I was being held in a federal facility, federal officers came into me and told me, "Give up the documents, Tatum. Give them up or else you'll be charged with treason. And if you don't go to prison for the rest of your life, you may even be executed." In lieu of giving those documents up, I decided to do something else. I published those documents, and I sent a copy to the White House. This is a Department of Defense International Flight Plan filed by myself and my co-pilot. The names in this section: Robert Brantner, our crew chief was a Mr. Rodriguez, and our medic was Gary Watkins. This flight plan was filed with base operations on February 26, 1985. The aircraft call sign was Dustoff 713. The actual number of the aircraft is also indicated on the flight plan. It shows that we flew a military mission in aircraft 7015713. We refueled at La Mesa. It shows that the people we flew as passengers were sent from Wally World, which was the intelligence compound at Pomerola Air Base. The names of the passengers were Cooper and Sawyer. Now, if you'll recall from a few moments ago, I told you about the cargo we flew. On the opposite side of this flight plan, we have the cargoes. As you can see, we were destined to transport vaccine to La Mesa. There was no one there to pick up the vaccine for 1 hour and 45 minutes. The note placed on it by me states that the vaccine popped open on landing while powdery substance, or a white powdery substance, advised Rodriguez via Lima Lima, suspected cocaine. Container was large white cooler, similar to the ones I delivered to Arkansas in 1984. The stamp on it is Copia Certificada, which is a certified copy provided by the Honduran government. This particular government official has the originals in hand and is willing to produce the originals to any world court that is willing to prosecute those who are trafficking in cocaine in their country. This is a flight plan dated 18 March 1985. We flew aircraft 429, which was actually 4016429. I was a pilot. My co-pilot was Scott Williams, who many of you may recognize as a CIA asset. My crew chief was Bill McDonald, and again, my crew chief was E4 Rodriguez. This particular flight, we flew into several villages and then into San Lorenzo, Honduras. The personnel on board the aircraft were two, a Mr. North, who you know as Oliver North, and another passenger. The particular mission that we flew on this day required us to go into an area that was heavily shelled during the night. It was a Contra village. At the Contra village, we picked up a patient who had trauma to the leg, massive rib fracture, and the second patient had upper chest wounds. As the medic was treating the chest wound, he needed my help. I went over and helped him. Mr. North, who had arrived late at the aircraft that morning, making us 45 minutes for our takeoff, came over, exasperated that we were taking such a large amount of time working on these Honduran nationals, or on these, I should say, Contras. But they were Hondurans, they weren't Nicaraguans, so that you know. Mr. North had decided that we were taking too much time. He came over and told us to get the aircraft up and going. However, when he got to us, he looked at the chest wound. The chest wound was a gaping chest wound. The heart was exposed and it was beating. Mr. North fainted. It compounded the medic's duties in having to tend to old blood and guts Oliver North. He made the notes on this, his medical evaluation. Additional medics' comments are on the reverse of this particular flight plan.
Can you give us a clue what that's saying there on the comments?
Sure. The comments say approximate ground time 15 minutes. This was in delivering, in San Lorenzo, delivering the patients. 15 minutes is a large amount of time when you have chest wounds and so forth to offload ambulances to take to the primary care facility, to the tactical facility that was set up. And the medic was complaining here because it took so much time to get the people offloaded and into trauma care.
What we got here?
On the 16th of March, I was tasked to fly two individuals from Tegucigalpa on a sightseeing mission around Honduras, over the camps and back into Pomarola Air Base. We were flying an aircraft 228, which is actually aircraft tail number, I don't see it right offhand in here. At any rate, it was Dustoff 228. Mr. Hibbard was a pilot. I was his co-pilot on this particular mission. Our passengers were R. Young of the Arkansas National Guard and an M. Harari, who represented interests of Panama and was referred to as Ambassador Harari. M. Harari was actually Mike Harari, a Mossad agent. During the flight, I had installed a recorder, a cassette tape recorder that recorded all conversations on board the aircraft. We did activate that recorder during the flight. The personnel in the back of the aircraft, talking on our private intercom, did not know that what they were saying was not private. In the conversation between Mr. Harari and Mr. Young, Mr. Young was asking Mr. Harari basically, what's going on here? But he says Arkansas has the capability to manufacture anything in the area of weapons, and if we don't have it, we'll get it. Harari said in return, how about government controls? Well, Young then came in and said, the governor's on top of it, and if the feds get nosy, we hear about it and make a call. Then they're called off. He was looking around the countryside and continued, why the hell would anyone fight for a shithole like this? Harari referred, shaking his head in awe, what we do has nothing to do with preserving a country's integrity. It's just business. And third world countries see their destiny as defeating borders and expanding. The more of this mentality we can produce, the greater our wealth. We train and we arm. That's our job. And in return, we get a product, far more value than money for a gun. We're paid with the product, and we credit top dollar for the product. Still looking confused. Buddy was still looking confused, and Mike continued. Look, one gun and 3,000 rounds of ammo is $1,200. A kilo of product is about $1,000. We credit the Contras $1,500 for every kilo. That's top dollar for a kilo of cocaine down here. It's equivalent to the Americans' Kmart special, buy 4, get 1 free. On our side, we spend $1,200 for a kilo and sell it for $12,000 to $15,000. Now that's a profit center. And the market is much greater for the product than for the weapons. It's just good business sense. Understand? Buddy responded with, damn. So you guys promote wars and revolution to provide weapons for drugs. We provide the non-numbered parts to change out, and we all win. Damn, that's good. Harari, the Mossad agent, said in return, it's good when it works, but someone, how do you say, has his hand in the gopher? Buddy responding on the defensive. Well, we get our 10% right off the top, and that's plenty. Goofus can make it go a long way. Harari responded to that. Who is Goofus? Governor Clinton. That's our pet word for him. You know, they call the president POTUS for President of the United States. Well, we call Clinton Goofus for Governor of the United States. He thinks he is, anyhow. That's your problem in America, Harari responded. You have no respect for your elected officials. They're more powerful than you think and have ears everywhere. You should heed my words and be loyal to your leaders, especially when speaking to persons like me. Your remarks indicate a weakness, something our intelligence analysts look for. Hell, Mike, everybody knows that Clinton wants that White House and will do anything to get it. That's why I'm here instead of someone else. We know about the cocaine. Hell, I've picked it up before with Lassiter when he was worried about going on to Little Rock Air Base to get it. A new line of conversation ensued, and in this line of conversation, Young said this, answering Harari's question about what's going on in Arkansas. Clinton thinks he's in charge, but he'll only go as far as Casey allows. Me and my staff, we keep the lid on things. You know, complaints about night flying Arkansas people are private folks. They don't like a lot of commotion, and Mena just isn't the right place for the operation. It keeps us busy at the shredder, if you know what I mean. Dan the man, speaking of Lassiter, he does magic with the money. Between him and Jack Stevens, we don't have to worry a bit about it. Then we got Parks. If there's any problem, he's the man. Finnis oversees our drop zone. Nash, he's just like the boss's yes man. Personally, I think he's a mistake. And in finishing their conversation, he spoke of a man named Barry Seal. Buddy Young said, Seal and his guys, I like his attitude, and leave the driving to us, he said, quoting one of Seal's good old boys, saying, you like Seal? Mike asked. Buddy returned with, hell, he's the only one I trust. Respect is the word. Do you see much of him? Harari asked. Hell yeah, we test drive Clinton's rides before we send him on, you know. He laughed, grinding his hips, saying, how much coke do you reckon you can make in a week? Harari responded with, one camp can produce 400 keys a week. The others are about half that. But that's just our operation here. We have other sources in various parts of the world. Why do you ask? What? Oh, the governor wanted to know our capacity. Mike, who else is on the team? Well, hell, I forget who I told you about. Harari ran down the list from his memory, and then Young continued, oh, there's a manufacturer, these two, and the tape stopped at that point. That's a taped conversation between Mike Harari and Buddy Young. Buddy Young was the security chief for Governor Clinton of Arkansas.
What are we looking at?
This is a Department of Defense International Flight Plan filed on the 30th of March 1985 with operations at Pomerola Air Base. The flight was actually a day flight into La Mesa and then on into Tela, Honduras. We were delivering some people in for an overnight stay. That night, I was tasked by Wally World, the intelligence arm of Pomerola Air Base, to pick up several passengers. These are the notes from those passengers that I picked up and flew that night under night vision goggle flight. I flew a man named North, a man named Rodriguez, a man named Dr. Gus, who was actual General Alvarez, and a man named Ami Nir, who was the counterterrorism counselor to Shimon Peres of Israel. I flew them into Rus Rus, a camp outside of the main camp where a cocaine kitchen was operating by the Contras. We then went to Santa Ana, another cocaine kitchen in operation by the Contras. North said the following: Vice President Bush was going to take care of Seal and Noriega. They spoke about the meeting in Costa Rica 6 days prior, said Barr had spoken to Bush via SATCOM. The Vice President ordered that Seal and Noriega be taken out. When Barr handed me the phone, Vice President Bush seemed very agitated. He wanted the serial number of Seal's aircraft. He said if we needed to, we may have to take extreme measures. He told me that these men were out of control. This shouldn't be happening, he said. Do you understand? I told him that I did, but I really didn't at that point. This shouldn't be happening, he had repeated. Now it's going into perspective. He wants a hit on Seal and Noriega. It'd be pretty easy, a cooler marked med supplies on Seal's plane, but one like we'd put on Torrijos' aircraft. One in Noriega's plane too. That would take care of the problem. Barr said he'd take care of it, though. I wonder what he'll do. These were my notes on the 30th of March, 1985. I believe today we know exactly what he did to take care of Mr. Seal and Mr. Noriega. Initial conversations in that camp indicated that from Mr. North that Jeb would take care of it with his friends in Colombia. I believe in 1986 Barry Seal was assassinated by 3 Colombians. The documents you've viewed are contained in the Tatum Chronicles. The Tatum Chronicles are available by calling 1-800-201-7892 extension 58. That's 800-201-7892 extension 58. On the 19th